Now, if you want to get out of the single market, which is what the Leave campaign want to do, the worst thing we could do is pull out of the single market, as those who want us to leave suggest. If we were outside the single market and we had a deal like, say, America does, which is what the head of the Leave campaign has recommended, just picture the scene. We're out of the single market, out of the European Union. You know, are we quitters? Do we think we quit the European Union, we quit the single market? But I think the way to meet that challenge mustn't be to leave the single market by trashing our economy and pulling out of the single market. We're in the single market. It's a market of 500 million people. If we were to get out of the single market, just imagine again if we left. So you've got the effect by leaving of losing access to the single market. We're in that single market I've been talking about, 500 million people, in the bits we want to be in, principally the single market. I think it is worth stopping for a second to understand why coming out of the single market is so damaging. Out of the single market, but let's be frank about this thing that we're a member of, the single market. It is the biggest single market in the world. Leaving the single market would be an act of economic self-harm for Britain. You have 2 years to negotiate. At the end of those 2 years, you are out, and you have to operate under World Trade Organization rules. Is to wreck our economy by taking ourselves out of the single market. If we shrink our economy by leaving Europe and leaving the single market, they want us to be in the single market for those jobs. I am genuinely worried about Britain leaving the single market. Why would we want to cut ourselves off from the single market? Because we're in the single market. Here's my fear. We leave the single market. So my fear would be if we leave the single market, because if we stay in the single market with all the opportunities that gives us, if we were to vote to leave. Now, I've talked about the trade effect. That's because you're no longer part of the single market. I want to get on with this. Our special status in the single market. I keep going on about the single market, but it is so important.